We each have a worldview. It shapes how we take in information and how we understand and interpret the world. It becomes a lens through which we filter interactions, news, and communication. So what happens when you and I see the same thing, the same action, but our filters are radically different? Hi, I'm Alana Redstone, and I want to talk to you about how we communicate on sensitive topics, with the goal of providing a starting point for future conversations. As comfortable as it is to live in a bubble, it turns out this is a very difficult way to solve problems and to build a sense of community. Consider this. In a 2012 study in the Stanford Law Review, researchers showed an identical video of a political demonstration to people with different worldviews. Subjects varied on their attitudes towards egalitarianism and hierarchies and individualism versus communitarianism. Although the same video was shown to all subjects, some were told that the demonstrators were anti-abortion protesters, while others were told that the protesters were part of a group that supported openly LGBTQ members in the military. The subjects were then asked to weigh in on whether the demonstrators had crossed the line from protest to prohibited conduct, or whether they'd engaged in lawful speech. Results showed that who saw what depended critically on the relationship between the demonstrators' causes and the subjects' own values. In other words, it depended on their lens. Ideologically split and politically polarized are terms often used to describe the current climate in American society broadly and to describe college campuses in particular. The path forward involves recognizing that on many issues, there is a range of valid perspectives that may be brought to bear. We can probably all concede that there are some topics where having different viewpoints is unnecessary. For instance, few people would argue that we need an astronomy class taught by someone who asserts the sun revolves around the Earth, or a geography class taught by someone who asserts the Earth is flat. On topics like these, where we feel like science has given us an answer beyond the shadow of a reasonable doubt, we're probably in agreement on what's true. And this agreement happens pretty much universally. In other words, it doesn't vary by sex, race, ethnicity, or political orientation. We can probably also agree that there are some topics where a wide range of viewpoints makes life richer and more textured. For instance, on questions like, what's the best movie of the last 50 years? Or what's the right way to hang toilet paper? We are all pretty happy to have a debate. Recognizing the importance of a diversity of perspectives becomes much harder when the issue at hand is controversial and when the stakes are higher. In general, questions that touch on identity or that impact members of marginalized or vulnerable groups are much more fraught. For instance, what if the question instead is, should we get rid of affirmative action? Should trans women be allowed to compete in women's category sports? Or what should our border policy be? These questions tend to get our defenses up in a way that the others do not. It turns out that for many issues, recognizing that there is a multiplicity of valid perspectives that can be brought to bear is just as important as it is on the best movie or the toilet paper question. Here's why. First, history is rife with examples of things we've gotten wrong. Look no further than the claim of the sun rotating around the Earth. Or consider the correct view on homosexuality in the 1950s when it was understood to be a type of mental dysfunction. Again, we're glad to have that in the rearview mirror. By extension, what reason is there to think that this time around we've finally gotten everything right? Consider the more controversial questions we posed at the beginning. If we care about solving problems, getting it right should matter. A lot. Second, when one side believes they have a monopoly on the acceptable answer to a controversial question, people who align with that view feel justified in telling someone who doesn't agree that they're bad for seeing it differently. Not only is this unlikely to get the person to change their mind, it may have unintended consequences. It can make the person resentful, close-minded, or even push them to a more extreme position than they had before. So we need to make room for a wide range of perspectives. Does that mean anything goes? No. There will always be topics and language that are not acceptable, such as things that intentionally hurt or humiliate other people. But if some ideas are unacceptable, who decides where the boundary is? Well, that has to be negotiated. Polarization results in part from when the set of views that are okay to discuss shrinks. In other words, the ideas of one side become enshrined in such a way that questioning or criticizing them is considered morally unacceptable. Consider these examples. America is the land of opportunity, and I don't support race-based college admissions. If one person thinks these are reasonable positions to take and another person thinks they are offensive, communication will be difficult. Recognizing that there are other valid ways of understanding and thinking about the world is something that often needs conscious effort. In the following videos, we will dive into the unintuitive and sometimes surprising barriers that exist and offer some suggestions on how to break them down.